I'm in the Laura Russo Gallery, and we're at Lucinda Parker's new show, Not an Exit, which has this really nice big paintings and also some smaller paintings that she did for a public art project. Hi, Lucinda. Hi. So could you tell me just a little bit about, well, first of all, I think I just want to start with these big paintings, and maybe what you could do is just like take us through making one of these and a little bit about the process. And you know, they all look really laborious to me, and like a lot of work is in them, so I don't know which is the perfect one to maybe to discuss first. Okay, all right.
First of all, let me say that these big paintings were done at the same time as the enormous painting I did for Longview, which was 10 feet tall by 40 feet long. So these paintings were done on the perpendicular wall in my studio. So in relation to this huge painting, these were really rather manageable. So they had the feeling of sort of sparks from the fire. You know, the fire was a big painting.
Right.
These were the medium-sized paintings that were relatively small compared to that big painting. And what happened was I was working on the big painting every day over a period of a year, but then I didn't work all day long on it. You know, I had to have a little time off. So these were the paintings I did to take time off from this big one, which, because it was a public project, I had less room to improvise on them. I had more of a relationship with my jury where I had to do a certain thing, which was fine. So these I was more experimental with. And there were lots of different shapes that were buried in these paintings until I finally came upon the final shape, which was a simplified version of what might have been underneath it. So there are lots and lots of layers of shapes and decisions made about where things are in front of other things.
You once told me that when you're first painting, you're just laying down colors that are maybe not even your favorite colors, so just to kind of get paint down.
Yeah,
all right.
Something, and then I get a figure-ground relationship going eventually, and there is a figure-ground here, which is this white piece that's way out in front, and then the darker piece above it, which is sort of like a leaf, and then underneath there is another leaf, and then here's a twig. So this is a gigantic. It's called branchlet. And it's
branchlet.
And that's a made-up word. But it's a made-up word that implies you broke off the top of a section of a branch and you held it in your hand, and this is a giant version of it.
Giant version of it. And so you're telling us, too, these are nature-based. Your work is vaguely or lots?
I wouldn't say it was nature-based, but there's certainly a reference to nature. I don't start with nature.
Okay.
I start with form, and then the form looks like nature to me, but it's highly abstracted because my thinking about structure is really about shapes and gestures and how they fit into a rectangle. So that's the main thing I think about. You know, a person who plucked a leaf and then made a big painting of it would come out with something totally different to this.
Right. Are you looking at architecture? Do you ever refer to architecture?
Not so much
some of your works like this over here, I mean, this could almost be, I don't know.
Well, it looks like sculpture to me.
Okay, all right.
I mean, it's like I'm trying to make something that would almost stand up on its own. You know, so to me, this is called laterals, and laterals are the roots and the branches that come sideways from a plant. They have it's got other meanings, but particularly in botany it means sideways reaching branches and sideways reaching roots. And so I made this painting in which everything is going this way and it's all coming up to the top in the corner. That's why it's called lateral. So it's like it could be built out of steel or something.
It could be built out of steel, right?
It isn't, but it's built out of paint, but it looks dimensional.
Now, part of this is also color choice, like you use gray sometimes into your color, no?
Yeah.
Yes? I mean, that is part of maybe being able to build it and make it sort of architectural or sculptural.
Well, it's that gray sort of is a rest for your eye with all this bright color.
All right.
There's a little bit of neutral in there that helps you see it in relation to the bright yellows and stuff. So I like yellow and gray and off-white and black.
Now, you told me once that you had worked in sculpture like years ago. Initially.
Yeah.
So you have that sculptural interest. Do you think that's just always going to be there? You're getting it in your painting, in other words. You're kind of putting it in your painting.
Well, I'm not interested in making sculpture per se because then it has to literally stand up.
All right.
And I don't want to have to structure something that actually physically has to stand up.
Okay.
That involves a lot of construction. You know, this is all an illusion. This is an illusion of something that stands up.
Okay.
So it's a whole different thing. And I like what the paint does.
Okay.
I like being able to tear it down and rebuild it every day, whereas a sculptor, he has to hit his head against the wall repeatedly until he gets it to hang together, and that is a whole different thing.
Okay, can we go to some of your smaller works, like maybe over here? Maybe just start with this. These are all, and of course it's a little bit difficult for me to get these to read because I've got the reflection, but these are all works that are from your Longview Public Art Project, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
They're preparatory drawings, and they are this 1-to-4 ratio. So
we were talking about ratio?
Ratio. This is 1-to-4, so it's 10 feet by 40 feet in the actual painting. And so each one of these small gouaches is that ratio. These are the larger ones, and there's some medium-sized ones, and there's some little tiny ones. And when I did them, I started with the little tiny ones and just basically played with that proportion of 1-to-4.
Okay.
And tried out a whole bunch of different things at the same time as.
And there's a lot in this show, right?
There's
got
a lot.
maybe
there's 4 of this
8.
size,
Okay.
4 of the smaller size, and then the little tiny ones. There's maybe 12 or 14.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot. So what happened was I started with the small ones, and they were preparatory, and I knew I had to show them to the jury, and the jury was a Longview jury, and I think I was trying very hard to make something that dealt with the watershed in Longview, because Longview is at the base of a huge pile of big mountains that goes back towards St. Helens and Adams and Rainier, and there's rivers flowing through these mountains. There's 6 rivers in Cowlitz County, so that's really what these paintings were about, these 6 rivers. And this is a more realistic version, but the littler ones are more abstract. And I'm looking for a big shape like this. Mm-hmm. And this particular shape is based on the idea of a splash dam. In the old logging days, they used to back up a steep river in a valley, and they would dam it, and then they would fall the logs into this lake, and then they would blow the dam up and let the logs all go whoosh, crashing down to the big river, which in this case is Columbia. Mm-hmm. So that's where the idea came from, but I was also looking for certain kinds of shapes that I like. I really like this shape. So I was looking for a story to go with the shape.
Right, now let me ask you, is it fun going back into your drawing skills like this?
Oh, yeah. Tell me it's all made up.
Okay, it's all made up.
It's all made up.
It's all made up.
I don't look at anything real.
They're not giving, do they give you photographs? I mean, like, in other words, you didn't look at Long Beach pictures? Or
No. I read some books. I read a whole bunch of books, but I didn't look at photos. I look at clouds. I look at water. But I wasn't looking at anything. I wasn't looking at any real watercolor.
Right. You're kind of going for the feeling.
Well, I was going for shapes and structure.
All right.
And then I guess that gives you feeling.
Yeah, that gives you now, feeling. When you did this public art project, first, I think you said it already, but how long did it take you all together?
Well, I started these sketches 05, and from 06 all the way through to 07, there really was nothing to do because the building wasn't finished. So I was working on other things. And then 06, I spent all of 06 on the big painting.
Right.
But these were already done.
But like you said earlier, you kind of go back to your other work, to your abstract work.
I was working on my abstract paintings.
These flares off to the side.
Off to the side.
Off to the side,
all the time I was making this big painting, which is much more like this.
Much more like this.
Much more recognizable, much more of a landscape, waterscape.
But when you're doing that, you're still, I guess what I would imagine is that you can go back to these and purely think of them as just forms.
I do think of them as forms.
Because you've got that other stuff, especially happening to you all the time.
But I think that way because my brain works that way.
You're thinking that way anyway.
I'm thinking that way anyway, and all these shapes are shapes and clouds, and they're spheres and suns, and they're stripes and water. I mean, they're all both things at once.
They're all both things at once. You think about your abstract works that way.
Always.
Yeah.
And even these paintings, which are very abstract, they have references, which I think of as being, big branches, but I'm not looking at real branches.
Yeah. Just like you had that painting we talked about before that had the seahorse shape.
Yes.
It was a shape, but it was a seahorse at the same time.
But it was
as I recall.
Still abstract.
Well, yes, that's what I mean, shape, whatever.
Yeah.
When you do a public art project, is this, when you then go back to your other work, right, to your abstract work that you make, do you get a fresh head?
I do.
It help?
I do. And it's because I stretched myself towards this little town of Longview.
Right.
And I stretched myself to make something that they would like. And actually, I enjoyed doing that. I wouldn't want to do it all the time. Mm-hmm. But I enjoyed it because I got to talk to all these people that I would never talk to otherwise. People that are holding other lives than mine,
New information.
Well, and I read a lot of interesting books about logging, about the history of Longview, about the woods, about Indians,
right?
All those things. I read all that stuff, and to me, I like to read, and it's like you don't need to read that stuff in order to make a painting, but I need to read that stuff to make a painting, just because it gives you mulch.
It gets you in your head, yeah. It gives you mulch. Interesting.
Yeah, really.
Interesting. All right, well, thank you, Lucinda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was fun.